how is it possible that I go to bed on Friday night, everything's hunky-dory, and I wake up Monday morning to financial Armageddon? I do think trust is being eroded because more and more people in every profession are having to abandon the pursuit of excellence in order to make ends meet. The number one cause for divorces is money. The number one reason for social unrest is money inequality. Don't you think it's unimaginably odd that none of us understands that banks create money out of thin air? 2 to 3% of the people of the United States participated in the revolution, only 2 to 3%. And look where we are. This is an idea whose time has come. This is so profoundly important, not just for you, but for your kids and your grandkids.
Welcome to Medium of Exchange, the podcast where we spotlight business owners building on a Bitcoin standard. Today's guest is someone bringing clarity to two worlds that don't often intersect, dentistry and Bitcoin. Dr. Mark Link is a dentist and the founder of the Bitcoin Dental Network, where he helps dental professionals understand sound money, strengthen their practices, and align their work with long-term value. And today, we are digging into his journey, the vision behind the Bitcoin Dental Network, and what it means to build a practice and a life on a solid foundation. Dr. Mark, it is an honor to have you on Medium of Exchange. Thank you for joining me, sir.
Jason, it's great to be here. Happy to be here. So looking forward to the conversation.
Same here. So you've built this really interesting bridge between healthcare, specifically dentistry, and Bitcoin. And I'm curious, what was the core philosophy that really convinced you that these worlds belong together?
You know, honestly, I wouldn't say that it was something that I constructed initially out of intention. This was all a byproduct of what happened to me in 2008. My wife and I had just borrowed $1 million back when $1 million was a lot of money to build out our brand new dental suite, And the day we moved in, no exaggeration, was the day that Hank Paulson and George W. Bush got on the national news to pitch the TARP bill. For those that weren't around or that's a foreign name, it was the Toxic Asset Relief Plan. And basically, it was a plan for the taxpayers to bail out the too big to fail banks who had actually created the crisis to begin with. And, for 6 months after that event, none of my patients, none of the ones that were, even the ones I knew were financially well-heeled, were making any discretionary treatment decisions. And so for the first time in 20 years of my career, I was, furloughing my staff. I was, not taking a paycheck just for us to stay afloat. And nothing like that had ever happened to me in all my previous 20 years of private practice. It's not like I was green behind the ears, I knew what I was doing. I had a thriving practice. It was a very traumatic moment. And, I asked myself the question, how is it possible that I go to bed on Friday night, everything's hunky-dory, and I wake up Monday morning to financial Armageddon? How is that even possible? It was also very self-revolutionary in a way because I realized just how naive I was about the financial waters I was swimming in. I had no financial education in elementary school, in high school, in graduates, even in dental school, nothing, zero. And I did not like the feeling that I had at that moment. And so I went on this mission to learn how to prevent myself from ever being in that situation again. And as odd as it seems, because it's not super easy to see how that would lead somebody to Bitcoin, but to the extent that Bitcoin is sound money, money that can't be debased, all roads that are sound lead to Bitcoin, in the financial world. And that will be something that I think Everybody will start to find out over time. It wasn't by design, but it was something that changed my stars financially. It allowed me literally to retire, and I got into it initially for that reason, but now I'm in it because to me it solves so many problems in the world, and I want more of my colleagues in particular, everybody at large, to benefit from this tool that is available to everybody. Yeah, so I know that's a long answer to your question, but that's kind of my Bitcoin story. I stumbled into it.
And I'm sure it's easy to look back and see how much you've learned and how ultimately positive it was, but that had to have been an absolutely gut-wrenching moment going through that. You took out this massive loan,
Yeah.
um, and then the economy just falls
Oh.
right out from under you. And I mean, how did you get through that?
Well, I mean, that was really, really, really tough. I mean, I don't want to make my situation kind of sound like the poor me thing because relative to so many other people, I mean, 5 million people lost their homes, tons of people lost their jobs. And most of us lost 50% of the value of the dollars that we had saved to that point in time. I had 3 little kids at home, and it was terrifying, actually, and I was at risk of losing my business, which I had built over 20 years. So it was like 20 years of sweat equity that could have been flushed down the toilet, start over not as an entrepreneur, not as a business owner, start over as an associate in some corporate practice. That's kind of what I probably would have had to have done. So, yeah.
I I think about how going through something so traumatic like that, it could potentially lend itself to you becoming more financially conservative, and yet the juxtaposition between that and something like Bitcoin, which is frequently referenced as high risk, it's correlated with like tech stocks and lots of volatility. It's way too volatile. And how did you come to the conclusion that Bitcoin is actually sound, that Bitcoin is actually a tool for but maybe sort of a conservative tool, maybe a tool for protection as opposed to this high risk asset.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I would like to say that I, saw it for what it was right out of the gate, but that's not the case. My journey literally has been now almost a 20-year journey, or 15 at least. But I think most people view it that way because they're not zooming out. They're looking at day to day. But if you even look at any 5-year period over the last 15 years, it has been the best performing asset of any asset. So I wouldn't say that Bitcoin is, the medium upon which I would want to save for tomorrow. But it is the medium on which I want to save for 5 years from now. And just like, stocks and bonds, I mean, Amazon, one of the most volatile stocks, Apple, one of the most volatile stocks, but everybody thinks nothing of that. Why? Because their time horizon isn't tomorrow. Their time horizon is 5, 10, 15, sometimes, 20, 25, 30 years, right? And in that frame of reference, there is no better performing asset on the planet. And so um, you don't get there right away. And I think most people are thinking of it in the short term rather than the long term. And I also think that the mass media has done their greatest efforts to paint Bitcoin as being so volatile that volatility means risk. There's a difference between risk and volatility. Because no one would say that about Amazon. No one would say that about Apple or Google or any of these other very volatile stocks. And I think it's just a lack of understanding. So for me, I became a gold bug first. Um, and that was because after 2008, I started to learn about the banking system. I started to learn about what money is. And once you understand those two things, which, by the way, for anyone who takes the time, it will shock you to know how our money works, how our monetary system is constructed. And actually, once you know that, you understand that that's where the real risk lies. Okay. It's not in Bitcoin, which is outside of that system. It is being in that system that is the risky thing. And so,
Why is
yeah,
it risky?
well, why is the banking system risky? Oh gosh, there's number one. Number one, when we, I had I knew nothing about the banking system prior to '08. And then I read a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island, which is about the Federal Reserve and its creation. And I also came across a video, which I would highly recommend for anybody. It is called The Hidden Secrets of Money, episode number 4, Mike Maloney. And it's about 30 minutes long, but basically it demystifies how our very complex monetary system works. And banking is risky because the reality of it is that when we deposit our money in our banks, it's no longer our money. We are effectively loaning our money to the banks with no guarantee that they will repay it. And that's the fine print if you really look at the contract. And then they practice what's called fractional reserve lending. So they don't really keep the money that you give them in your account. They lend it out. That's one way they lend money. But that's actually a small fraction of the way they lend money. And this is another thing I didn't know. When I went in to borrow money for my practice, for my house, I assumed that the bankers had the money and that therefore, of course, they deserve to, earn interest on money that they were risking by lending it to me. But the reality is that that's not the way it works. They just type the numbers into the computer and then they create a loan to you. And the collateral is your business or your house or whatever it is that you're requesting the money for. And if you so much as miss one payment, then you're at risk of losing that asset. So that's super risky. And that's what 2008 was all about because the bankers took tremendous risk with our money and those risks didn't pay off. And unfortunately, rather than letting those bankers pay the consequence, the federal government and the Federal Reserve bailed them out. And so there's nothing more risky than our banking system. And it's sad that I have to say that, and it's shocking that I didn't know. I felt like such a moron that I didn't know. I thought I was like the stupidest person on the planet until I started asking around. And then, I have a ton of CPAs, certified financial planners, bankers in my bank employees who are my patients. And I would ask them, simple questions. They didn't know the answers. They didn't know that the Federal Reserve wasn't part of the federal government, that it's a private entity and it's owned by the big banks. It's just the whole thing is it's the biggest Ponzi scheme there's ever been. They make Charles Ponzi, they make Bernie Madoff look like kindergartners, really. And we just don't know any differently. So I know that again, another long answer to a short
Yeah,
question.
no, it's
Yeah.
my journey has been similar where um, Bitcoin has transitioned from something that felt overwhelmingly complex, where and volatile and risky, and I would almost to some extent like not sleep well at night because of it. And then as I learned about our current financial system, the better I slept at night knowing that I had Bitcoin because it's outside of the system and the volatility of the banking system the fragility, I should say, rather than volatility, the fragility of the current system, and how 2008 may not be the biggest crisis within my lifetime. Unfortunately, there could be something on par or greater at some point in the future, and the importance of having a form of money, which that was a big transition for me. Understanding that Bitcoin is not just a volatile asset, but it is money. It is sound money. To your point, and having something that's outside of the system, and yeah, it's interesting how such a trial, such a traumatic event like what you experienced, the day you moved in after taking $1 million loan, they got on the air and announced that I I had a traumatic event. I got hit by a car while riding my bike, and then after like months and months of PT and chiropractic and all this stuff, I ended up joining a CrossFit gym, and then I became just so much fitter than I ever was in the beginning. And it's such a unique thing where this trial turns into a blessing, and it
Mhm.
sounds like that is what happened to you. You kind of turn lemons into lemonade ultimately, over the long
Right.
time horizon, because you learned about this system. I think for a lot of professionals, though, especially in the medical field, they're just trying to improve the patient outcomes. They're just trying to improve their community and the dental care provided to that community, and take as best care of their employees and everything as they can. And then you bring something like Bitcoin. It's like magic internet money. It
Yeah.
feels overwhelming and complex. How do you simplify it for a dental practice or a professional of some kind, who are so new to it?
Well, a couple of things there. Number one, I practiced for 41 years. I just retired a couple of weeks ago. And
Congratulations.
thank you. Um, and when I first started practice, it was really much easier and much more common for dentists to be focused primarily on being experts at what they did. And as time went on, there was an encroachment of insurance industry, third party payers, and what I didn't know was that the underlying reason that what that was happening was that our money was getting debased. And so we went from a period of time where clinicians could have a low time preference, meaning they could actually invest in their employees, they could invest in their future, they could be looking down the road, they could take time to go to continuing education. And that has become so much harder to do for again, it seems like a multiplicity of reasons, but the reality is that the underlying reason is that our money is getting debased. So what happens when that happens? All of our employee costs go up, our supply costs go up. The loyalty of we no longer have the time to commit to each other as, in our staff, in our practices. You have to start to commoditize your service. And so what happens to most dentists and most physicians is that they actually lose touch with the art and science that they're practicing because they have to do all of these procedures that are billable in order to make ends meet. And I've seen this play out over 40 years. So, I mean, that was real. I just didn't understand why. Okay. So, back to your initial thing, clinicians, why should they bother with Bitcoin, we should be focusing. And I would say that the very simple thing is without sound money and without the ability to save in something that is going to appreciate over time, you can't practice. You can't improve your practice. You can't allocate time to do what Stephen Covey would call quadrant two things. You can't train your staff. You don't have time to train your staff. So It really, they go hand in hand.
I saw a survey that came out this year that said the number one concern for small and medium-sized businesses right now is inflation. And
No
it
doubt.
sounds like what you're saying that you've experienced over the last 40 years is that patient, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but patient care was priority number one when you got started. And as time went on, the insurance system crept in, intermediaries, the cost of everything continued to go up, and it became commoditized and harder to earn a living. And you attribute that to monetary debasement.
100%. And I even during the majority of my career when that was happening, I didn't see it for what it was. I did not see it. It was only that 2008 moment that made me lift my head up out of somebody's mouth and my small little world and zoom out and understand, my gosh, this is why things are getting harder.
So, in addition to inflation,
So, let me really drill
yeah,
that home. Okay, let me really
yeah,
drill that home. So, my dad practiced dentistry for 54 years. When he was 98 years old, I interviewed him. He bought his first dental practice in 1942 for $1,500. Today, I can buy one high-speed handpiece for $1,500. Now, just you got to let that sink in. What changed? That really says it all. My dad, on one dental income, my mom was a stay-at-home, mother. They had 11 kids. They paid for 65 years of higher education on one income. Today, fast forward, I'm a dentist. My wife is a dentist. And there's no way that we could do that same thing. No way. And back then, it was super common. All of my parents' friends, the Cadwells, the Knockways, the McGills, the Ferences, every single one of them had large families. The mom stayed at home, upper middle class lifestyle, and kids went to college. That was just like normal. And there is no way that's happening today. And again, unless you zoom out, unless you have that perspective, and again, I wouldn't have that perspective without this kind of epiphany that occurred because of 2008. We assume that prices are supposed to go up. Of course they're supposed to go up. But the reality is that they should be going down. Technology inherently makes us more productive people. I have a milling machine in my practice that I can now prep a tooth, digitally scan that tooth, and mill a crown in 2.5 hours. Uh, I used to have to take impressions, put all that goop in people's mouths, send it off to the lab, wait 6 weeks, come back, numb them. Yeah, it's fantastically more efficient, and yet my crown fees had to go up, and my profit margins continued to go down, even though technology was always getting better. And how do you explain that? The only way to explain that is to understand money, our monetary system, and the debasement of our currency. And it underpins absolutely all of the problems that every clinician, every business person is experiencing. We just don't see it.
what about insurance specifically? Some of the problems that I've heard from the healthcare industry, some of the roots of those problems are insurance. Is that separate from the monetary debasement? What ratio of these problems are insurance versus inflation? How do they work hand in hand?
Yeah, I actually don't think they're separate. I think all of these things are connected. So, again, back in 1965, when Delta Dental became a thing, prior to that, there wasn't dental insurance. Okay. And my dad accepted dental insurance for the first time And at that time, the maximum annual benefit that you could get as a dentist was $1,500 in a year. But that's a car was worth $1,500 back then. Fast forward to today, the maximum annual benefit is still $1,500, but the premiums have gone up dramatically. So, you know, i- the the insurance companies are a second layer of the onion because they're taking advantage of this debasement. They really are. And, patients often are kind of tossed in the middle of this. And it's so unfortunate. Because, $1,500 anymore, that doesn't even buy you a single crown. Back in 1965, it would have rebuilt your whole
Get you
mouth.
half a crown.
Yeah, yeah, it would get you a little over half a crown. But I mean, it's better than a poking eye. But even there, the way they construct the policies, and again, we're going on a tangent that is unrelated to say a lot of businesses, um, but you don't get as much for your money. They only pay for what's called half of the usual and customary. And, so if you want a average crown or a usual and customary dentist or an average dentist, I don't think most people want that. I think people want, you know, we we can compromise on certain things, but I think we'd like to have really good health care. Okay.
Yeah, for
And this
sure.
this debasement is undermining everything as far as that goes. And insurance are just a layer to the onion, and they're taking advantage of this because they are the masters of the financialization of everything. You've never seen an insurance company go out of business ever. At least I never have. And that's not the same about any
I
other business.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I haven't thought about that before, but I think you're right. Yeah. Insurance is an interesting industry. When I think about incentives and alignment, of course, what's stopping a dentist from saying you need a crown or root canal or you've got a dozen cavities? They've sort of got asymmetric information. When I look at an X-ray and they're like, "See this shadow right here," and I'm like, I guess I see it. I don't know. So how does Bitcoin reframe the way that you think? You're a dentist. You've got all this knowledge about Bitcoin. How does it reframe incentives and value? And long-term patient care. Um, how do those kind of coincide?
Yeah, I don't know so much, at least not for me, that there is that alignment in as much as um, y- I think as a clinician, you either care deeply about what you do and about your patients, uh, or you think more deeply about, hey, I want to make buck. Okay. And you could say that about any profession. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, your question about how would I know looking at an x-ray? Well, that's kind of like me saying to my IT guy, how do I know I need the new whatever? I have no idea. Right. So there is a trust that, but I do think trust is being eroded because more and more people in every profession are having to abandon the pursuit of excellence in order to make ends meet. In dentistry, it's very tangible. So when I first started practice, it was me and my dental assistant. So 4 hands, and actually later, even 6 hands. I would sometimes have 2 assistants. And now what you see in a lot of dental practices is you have a dentist, he goes in, he preps the tooth, and along behind him comes a moderately trained dental assistant who's working by herself. Okay, now even if that dental assistant was as good as every dentist and all the training that they've had and so on, can they really do as good of a job working by themselves as two people can do? No. So you'll see this, and if you go to a really busy dental practice, you might think, "Oh, they're really busy, therefore it's a good place to go." Well, the reality is that, it's kinda like the parable of the town that just had two barbers. And the guy walks in, and he goes to the first barber, and there's hair all over the place, you know? And then he walks a little further and he goes to the barber that has no hair, and he uh he ends up thinking, well, I'm going to get my hair cut, with the guy that's got all the hair on the floor. And the reality is that that may or may not be true in terms of the quality of care, right? Or the how good the haircut is. But the thing to tell would be to say, okay, of the two barbers, who has a nicer haircut, right? Because you know that in that town, and unfortunately, we don't have that litmus test in any profession. It's easy for you and I to see that Michael Jordan is far superior than Spud Webb as a basketball player. Very easy to see. It's very difficult for us to see that in every other arena. But I can tell you, in terms of the water, the financial system, to the extent that people are struggling, you're going to see an erosion of the quality of care. Humans are humans. They're going to do what they need to do in order to feed themselves. And it's not that's just the nature of the game. So I think that this is a major issue. All of the things that we view as external, whether it's obesity epidemic, food problems, everything we see that is a major problem has a financial underpinning to it. And then again, that's why Bitcoin is so revolutionary, in my view.
We learn as students, we learn math and science and biology, but practically speaking, money might be one of the most important skills that we never learn, particularly if all these things that you're saying are true about the pervasiveness and importance of understanding monetary debasement and how it influences everything from a dental practice to our personal lives, to saving for college, the ability to buy a business or start a business or survive in a business. Do you think financial education had, if it was taught at all, but especially if it was taught through an Austrian economics lens as opposed to a debt-based Keynesian lens, do you think, like, for you and others, life would look differently? Like, how would that impact?
That is a great
Um,
question. That is such a great question. It really is. It really is. But again, you're zooming out and you're asking such a great question. Um, you know, on average, humans will spend 78,000 hours of their life working for money. Now, they really don't want money. They really don't want money. They want the things that money can buy, right? And they want to also provide value to their fellow men. Like you want to have purpose in your life, right? It's not all about money for sure. Um, but in terms of the quality, I mean, the number one cause for divorces is money. The number one reason for social unrest is money inequality. The number one reason that nation states go to war is money. Don't you think it's incredibly, fantastically, unimaginably odd that none of us had any financial education, that none of us understands banks, that none of us understands that banks create money out of thin air? Money, I occasionally do a presentation to my colleagues, and I have this portion of my presentation which is about it's a thought experiment. I mean, if you had a money printer in your attic, would you occasionally use it? Of course you would, right? And if you had your neighbor had their house burned down, something unfortunate happened, and you could just print the money, might you, give them some money? Of course you would. If you did that over time, would that change your relationships? Of course it would. As you work through this thought experiment, you come to two conclusions. Number one, using a money printer, if any one of us had it, would be irresistible. We would all do it. It's a human nature thing. Okay. Anybody would do it. And number two is that it wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be fair that you or I or anybody else has the ability to create money out of thin air that everybody else is spending 78,000 hours of their life to earn. And yet, our entire financial system is based on two institutions that have that privilege. And those two institutions are made of people, and they're going to print money, and they do. And to the extent they do, all of these other second and third order consequences, everything that we've been talking about, all of the kind of layers of the onion, whether it's insurance, affordability, the change in the ability of over generations for parents to provide for their families, all of that is related to this one underlying, it's the common denominator. And again, Bitcoin, the amazing thing is you and I both know is that no one can print more Bitcoin. It's money.
I like how you included in that very visceral picture of a money printer in the attic, use the word occasionally. You're not painting this picture that it's a greedy, let me just extract as much as I possibly can. It's you paint this picture of empathy and benevolence, like your neighbor's house burned down. You're just going to help them out a little bit, right? And I think that's the root of it. It's you've got potentially well-intentioned folks who have access to the infinite money printer where they can make money for free out of thin air, which devalues the money in the system every time they do that. And it creates,
Which is a hidden tax on everybody, and it hurts the people who can least afford it the most.
I think that's one of the most frustrating things to me is that, I mean, I spent years working on trying to move the needle on homelessness. Very, very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But on the socioeconomic spectrum, you've got so many people above that stage who are housed, but that are struggling. And those vulnerable members of society, it's like reverse Robin Hood. That's one of the most frustrating things to me about the current system. The people in power are taking from the poor to give to the rich. The effects of the cancel-on effect are that the asset owning class get richer, and it's the non-ownership class that's getting poorer and struggling more and more, which, to your comment earlier, it creates civil unrest, which creates even more. It's just a flywheel. So how, from your perspective, especially for our listeners that don't necessarily know that much about Bitcoin, how does Bitcoin fix this thing? Why is Bitcoin a solution?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing that everybody needs to understand is the things that we were just talking about, that we have a system that is making them poorer every single day. Every single day. And it's structural, it's built in, it's baked into the cake. And Bitcoin is like the antimatter to that matter because because of its finite supply, because it is money that cannot be debased, and because it will always increase in value relative to the dollar over a long enough time frame. And really against all other assets that have been monetized, whether that's houses or, because there's a monetary premium to people's homes. The house that I'm living in, I built in 2017. It's now worth a full third more than it was 8 years ago. That's insane. Okay. The house is the same. As a matter of fact, it's probably, less better for the wear. Right. Okay. And yet, my taxes on it have gone up because the value of the house has supposedly gone up in nominal terms, right? And so I have 3 kids. I have my daughter is a veterinarian, my 2 sons are engineers, and they're struggling to be able to afford a home. If you go to, www.what WTF happened in 1971, you see all of these metrics, the disparity between the price of homes relative to the increase in salaries, the disparity, the number of people that are getting married later because they can't afford to have a home, and therefore they can't afford, in their view, to have a family. The divorce rate has gone up tremendously. All these metrics, there is literally a line in the sand that began in 1971 when Nixon took us off the gold standard that basically allowed every government on the planet to turn the money printer on without constraint. Prior to that, the debasement happened at a much slower rate, and generations could expect that the next generation would actually um, be better off because they would accrue the advantages that would come to them by virtue of the productivity that's inherent in technology. But that's all been stolen since 1971 from the Gen Zers, the millennials, the Gen Xers, all of those. As you go back in time, each generation is having a greater and greater difficulty to just crack the nut of basic needs. And that's again, I got into Bitcoin really because of number go up technology in a way of protecting myself from debasement. But the reason I'm so passionate about it, the reason it's so important to me is because I don't want my kids and my grandkids to be growing up in a world where they are slaves. That's exactly what's happening. Another thing that I never saw clearly. I used to always travel to the Caribbean or I'd go to Mexico, and I think, oh my gosh, these people, they work so hard, especially, the people I knew in Mexico, they were so nice, they were industrious and so on. But the population is so incredibly poor. How is that possible? And as soon as they come to the United States, all of a sudden they're doing great. Okay, well, what's the difference? Well, the difference is we have the world's reserve currency, and while it is the uh, cleanest dirty shirt in the laundry, it's way better than the peso, and therefore those people are impoverished, and they're stuck in being impoverished, and each generation is getting poorer, not because of their lack of industry, but because the money is losing value faster than they can create value. And yeah,
That's one of the sort of unjust, systemic injustices. And one of the things that I feel grateful for is that I lucky enough to be born in the country that has the global reserve currency. And that puts you and I a massive leg up ahead.
massive.
That we have, I mean, as unstable as it is, we have a stable currency relative to the others.
Yeah, yeah, and
It's interesting.
I'm actually hopeful though. We had a extremely dynamic economy up until the Federal Reserve was created, and from that moment forward, there's been this engineering that's gone on. It essentially at every level and at every moment in time has been that instead of allowing the people who took bad risks and invested their energy, time and energy poorly, instead of letting them fail, we prop them up. And so, and so,
We
but now,
socialize the
yeah, we
losses
that's we
and
exactly
then privatize the profits.
yeah, we privatize the profits and we socialize the losses. Yeah. Well, so but now we have this opportunity. It is a once in a humanity opportunity. And it is embodied in this thing that we call Bitcoin. Because it is going to give people back their money. The reason I started accepting Bitcoin in my dental practice at that juncture wasn't to make me richer. It was to lend credibility to this ecosystem that I know if people would just opt out of the fiat system and opt in to the Bitcoin system, if they would just do that in mass, it would be overnight. Things would just be radically different. It's not going to happen that way. but it is possible. And there is a future that where I can see where my kids and grandkids, um, will be in that future where we have sound money again. And I'm very excited about that. I mean, it's an opportunity that will never come again. We need to get on this lifeboat. Everybody. Yeah.
Another blessing to have
It is.
discovered it and
Yes. But even from a
to
more
have discovered
pragmatic
it.
Even from
Yeah,
a
go
more
ahead. Yeah.
pragmatic standpoint, I mean, because this is a medium of exchange, right? Podcast. When I look at all the other payment systems that are out there, let's just kind of one for one. Number one, it's basically cash without a cash register. Number two, there are no merchant service fees, really. So you're literally skimming 3%, at maybe 2% off the top. And in my practice, I paid between $30,000 and $40,000 every year in merchant service fees. For what? Convenience? You know, uh, it's faster. It's immediate settlement. It's an asset that's appreciating. It's easy as it's so easy to do. People just have to get past the mindset that it's hard. I mean, Steak and Shake, I don't know if you've gone to Steak and Shake yet, but their kiosk is so amazing. And it's way better than credit cards. But you're accepting money in an appreciating asset. And if you're a small business and only a 1 or 2 or 3% of your clients are paying you in Bitcoin, you don't really need to touch that money. You can just leave it off to the side and let it grow, and it will. I accepted $15,000 in Bitcoin payments my first year, and that is now worth $32,000 a year and a half later. I mean, I didn't do anything for that. I just let it sit there. Okay. What would have happened if I just left it in dollars? It'd be probably a third less, right? In terms of its purchasing powers. That's awesome. And then finally, free advertising. If you accept Bitcoin, you can put yourself on the Bitcoin Map app, and there's 40 to 60 million people in the United States who have a Bitcoin wallet. So now they may not want to spend their Bitcoin right now, but uh, but
Some of them do.
that's a big, big, big audience. Okay, and it doesn't cost you anything to put your name on the map, other than you have to accept Bitcoin. Well, how easy is that? And then I use the Orange Pill app or the Orange Club app now, and that gives me direct access to all the Bitcoiners in my space. So in my community. So if I want to attract them, I can say, "Hey, fellow Bitcoiners, not only am I a great dentist, but I'll give you a 10% off for coming in." And why would I do that? Because I'm going to be accepting currency that I know is going to appreciate on average 30 to 50% a year, and I'm giving somebody a 10% break for doing it. It's a win for them, win for me. And I don't have to pay the 3% merchant service fees. I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's an absolute no-brainer to do this. Collectively, we just need to get over that hump. It's that easy.
And what are you doing with the Bitcoin Dental Network to help accelerate the value and importance of everything you just described and how it relates to a dental practice?
Well, the website that I've created is really just a curated site for, that of all of this, the kind of my 15-year journey included a lot of self-education. And, I kissed a lot of toads along the way. But this is a curated site, and everything on that site, if you just walk through it top to bottom, your eyes are going to be wide open. Literally within a couple of hours, you're going to be like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe I did not know." And it's only from that position. It's only from that position that you can decide, okay, I'm going to stick my toe in the water here. And then, of course, I'm going to be populating it with how-tos on how to accept Bitcoin in your practice, especially as that evolves. Because as you know, Square recently started accepting Bitcoin, and all you got to do is toggle the button. It's literally a 2.5-minute thing. How amazing is that? So I didn't use Square. I used Zapright, which was equally easy. Took me 30 minutes to onboard, another 30 minutes to train my staff. But, Jason, when I go someplace, every business I walk into, I say, "Hey, do you accept Bitcoin yet?" Every single place I go. And 5 years ago, when I started doing this, people would look at me like I was a Martian. They wouldn't even know what Bitcoin is. Recently, I went into Discount Tire to get 4 new tires on my car. I walked in, I said, "Hey, do you guys accept Bitcoin yet?" And the young guy across the counter said, "No, not yet, but I wish we did, and you're not the first person to ask." That was 4 years later. I've personally gotten 5 restaurants in Denver to accept Bitcoin, just by asking, just by asking. I accept Bitcoin, and so a lot of my patients ask me, why do you accept it? So it starts this conversation, what is Bitcoin? Why would you do that? Blah, blah, blah. And then I patronize other businesses. So the first thing I do when I go to another city is I see what businesses accept Bitcoin. And if I need to get my hair cut and there's somebody who accepts Bitcoin, that's where I go. Uh, Again, getting back to, the free advertising. I love Steak and Shake, like I literally love Steak and Shake. Um, Not because they accept Bitcoin. Well, I love it because they accept Bitcoin, but I also like it because I was reintroduced to them. It was a dying kind of hamburger place, but they have the best shakes on the planet. And so what I'm saying is that it's easy for businesses to get involved, but even as individuals, it's easy to start getting exposure just by going to Steak and Shake and seeing, oh my gosh, Steak and Shake does this, you know? So,
Can you refresh our listeners the URL? And let me back up. It sounds to me like the Bitcoin Dental Network website that you've created is actually quite relevant for merchants of all industries, merchants
yes,
of all shapes and sizes, and you could even call it the Bitcoin Merchant Network or something, because it
right.
sounds very applicable to really anyone that runs a business.
Yes. Yeah. Because, really, the site basically walks you through, what is the problem from a 30,000-foot view? Number two, how does our banking system work? And again, once you see, you can't unsee. And then the third thing is, what is money? And the fourth thing is, what is Bitcoin? And then how do you accept it? It's like boom, boom,
I love
boom,
it.
and
It's amazing.
yeah, it is. I mean,
And what's the URL again?
it's just, the Bitcoin Dental Network.
Okay.
W
I'll include
www.
it in the show notes, but
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the best way to, and I publish a newsletter. I try to highlight the best video of the week. I watch a lot of videos now that I'm retired. And if I find something that I think is particularly good, I'll put it on there. So yeah.
okay, cool. So is there anywhere where else you want to send folks? Again, that URL is thebitcoindentalnetwork.com.
Yeah, I think that's the best way. If they want to contact me personally, it's just Mark at the Bitcoin Dental Network. And I am super jazzed. I would really love for any dentists that are hearing this, if you have a dental society, if you're struggling, if you would like to learn about what, the magic, the cheat code that Bitcoin is, reach out to me. I'll fly there. I'll give you a presentation and, we'll do some Q&A. Let's let it, this is going to happen one business at a time. I mean, 2 to 3% of the people of the United States participated in the revolution. Only 2 to 3%. And look where we are. And this is an idea whose time has come. This is so profoundly important, not just for you, but for your kids and your grandkids. And so that's why I'm so passionate about it. Yeah, so I'm happy to help, and those are the best 2 ways to get in touch with me.
This is amazing. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, maybe I'll fly in with you. We'll see what
Yeah, we
opportunities
should
come
do
up.
that. That would be
It'll be
awesome.
fun.
I would love to do that. Yeah.
Awesome. Mark, thank you for joining me, my friend.